to Inside the Admissions Office, your one-stop shop for expert advice on the smart way to get in. My name is Ellen, and each episode I'll bring you an interview with a former admissions officer, a graduate of a top college, or an admissions expert. These interviews will take you inside the admissions office and will be full of behind-the-scenes knowledge, first-hand experiences, and application tips to help you get into your dream school. If you'd like to chat with one of these experts, you can sign up for a free consultation at the link in the description of this episode. Today, we'll hear from Columba MFA graduate, InGenius Prep Graduate Coach, and writing professor at the University of New Haven, Padya Paramita. Padya and I will discuss 11 common college admissions myths and reveal whether they're true or false. Hi, Padya, how are you today?
Hi, Ellen. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Well, you're a frequent guest of the pod, but you have had some life updates since you've last been here. So, give us a background, tell us what's new with you.
Yeah, sure. So in previous podcasts, I've said I'm a graduate of Wellesley College. I studied English and Women's and Gender Studies there. And the new updates are that I've just completed my MFA in creative writing and creative nonfiction from Columbia. And I am starting a teaching position in a couple of weeks at the University of New Haven. I'll be an adjunct professor teaching first year English. So I'm very excited and nervous, but hopefully it all goes well. And at InGenius, I am a graduate coach and the digital content specialist. So alongside working with students, I also write content such as blogs and e-resources on the admissions process for our audience.
And so you interviewed some of our former admissions officers to get the information for this episode. Could you just tell us some of the schools that they're from?
Yeah. So we've had a few admissions officers weigh in on these different factors. So we had admissions officers from Dartmouth, from Brown, from Johns Hopkins, Bowdoin, U Chicago, as well as the University of Michigan, who have lent us their knowledge for these myths.
Okay. Myth number 1, true or false? Legacy students have a better chance of admissions. So what's the consensus?
Yes, so our former admissions officer said that this one is true. Many colleges, such as MIT, have said they don't, but primarily most colleges, especially the elite colleges, do look at legacy, and they each define legacy very differently. For example, at Princeton, they only consider a student legacy if their parents or step-parents attended the school. Some colleges will think about siblings as legacy. Some colleges might consider like aunt or grandparents, but it depends on school. But the consensus is that at many, especially the top and the most selective school, legacy might give you an edge if it's you versus another competitor or a competitive candidate who might have the same stats, and then legacy might play that factor.
Myth number 2, and this is something that has come into light probably as of 2019. I'm sure this has always been a myth, but as of 2019, this is a very big cultural conversation with Operation Varsity Blues, and unfortunately my alma mater, the University of Southern California, yikes. But true or false, you can buy your way into college.
It's false for most of us. So bribery should never be the case that allows a student into a college. You should definitely, depend on your hard work and your merits to get you in. So colleges do prioritize and very carefully review the applications of people who come from families of big donors. But the big donors are huge donations. For example, Stanford considers families capable of donating $500,000 or more as big donors. Some families think that if they make a gift or a donation, their students applying, it will matter. But, funding entire buildings previously wouldn't really count. So I would say it's false. You should really not depend on this to get you in. And after Varsity Blues, especially, colleges have become more conscientious of who they're letting in, who they're in contact with, and things like that. So don't try to repeat that. Definitely not.
Myth number 3 is one that we hear a lot from our clients and from potential clients. So true or false, there are stereotypical extracurricular activities that you should avoid.
Mm-hmm. For the most part, this is false if the student is sincerely committed to an activity. Some activities like a JV sport or Habitat for Humanity are, made fun of because it's an easy way for students to check off certain boxes. However, if the student is actually passionate about these things, all activities are totally fair. I think what's important is that you explain why this is meaningful to you and, why it's good for you to do, then it will matter, and the admissions officers will say that. Having said that, there are some activities, and you can get to myth number 4 for me to discuss those.
That's right. And myth number 4, true or false, debate and model UN are impressive activities for college. True or false?
Right. And this is false. And so a lot of students think that these will really help them with their college applications. I would say mock trial falls in that same category as well, but these are extremely common activities. Unless you're able to achieve, unprecedented success in them, they won't necessarily help you stand out very much. So for my students who have debate or model UN, I usually advise them to add them towards the end of their activities list, just so things that they've led and started and have more uniqueness about them shine better. So, a lot of students will have them, and especially if a student has participated in moderately and hasn't really led anything, these really won't help you stand out in college applications.
Right, and we have a lot of resources you've written in the blog about your activities list and about the order that you list things, etc. Mm-hmm. Myth number 6, actually, myth number 5. Mm-hmm. I jumped the gun. My apologies. Myth number 5, true or false? A high SAT or ACT score is all you need to get into a top college.
Yeah, this is a very popular one, and parents and students all really rely on their SAT score, but this is actually false because often we see so many students with perfect, like a 36 on the ACT or a 1600 on SAT get denied by top schools. That's because so many students do bring these scores and they don't really help you stand out. It just kind of is a metric for, their academic prowess and how they might be able to, work with college academics. But that said, your GPA, your rigor of your classes, your AP scores, these are far more important than the SAT score or ACT score when it comes to academic numbers. I would say also some students might think that having 1600 over a 1580 makes a difference, but this is something we called the threshold SAT score. At one point it stops making a difference. So I would say that testing has never been the most critical factor in the college admissions process, especially with test optional becoming more and more common. Admissions officers are paying attention to, other facts, even like activities, academic activities that show why you're fit for a certain program or not, into their admissions decision. And, some schools are even test blind. I would say the University of California schools don't look at test scores at all. I recently saw that the College of Agricultural Sciences at Cornell University doesn't consider test scores at all. So really, if you have a weak SAT score and you're concerned, I think if the rest of your application is strong, you should definitely take advantage of the test optional policy because you will look like a really strong applicant.
Do you think this is still the case for colleges that are a little less highly ranked? So maybe schools 30 through 50 or 50 through 100, is a high SAT score more of a factor for these schools?
I would say yes and no. Depends really on the student. If the student is excellent all around and they have a great SAT score, I think that's definitely an advantage. But if you are submitting your SAT score and it's low compared to your GPA, even at a smaller school or a lower ranked school or a less selective school, it might give you a disadvantage. But if your score falls within the median range, you should definitely submit it because it's likelier that your low, relatively low score falls within the median range of a less selective school than at Harvard or Princeton.
Now, myth number 6, for real this time. True or false? Colleges consider your family's finances when deciding to admit you.
This is true at many colleges, and we call these need-aware schools. So if you give a quick Google, you can find out whether a college's financial aid office is need-blind or need-aware. So need-blind means that the student is considered regardless of their ability to pay for the college, but need-aware means that a college might decide to take a student who's able to pay more rather than a student who's not, who needs more financial aid. It truly depends on each cycle and how much money they have, allotted to their budget for different students and different areas of students. Sometimes we've seen that international students get less financial aid than national students, or that international students, that in their case, that a college may be need aware, but it's need blind for domestic students. So it truly depends on the school, but I would say overall, it's true at need aware colleges. I will also say that the most selective colleges, especially the Ivies and schools like Stanford and MIT, are need blind usually. So a quick Google such as, is Columbia need blind will give you the answer.
Myth number 7, you need, true or false, you need a perfect GPA to be admitted to top colleges.
No, so like the SAT score one, this is false as well, but I will say the GPA, as we've said, it is more important than the SAT score, but we have definitely seen students with less than the perfect GPA get into top schools. It's not about perfection at all. What the admissions officers want to see is that students are taking the most rigorous and difficult courses available to them, and they've, sustained a level of success. A pluses, A's, these are usually good. And if you've gotten an A minus at some point, what's important is that they see that you've bounced back and you've tried to pursue this class despite the difficulties. And I would say that make sure that striving for a perfect GPA does not distract you from developing your interest and pursuing activities where you can actually make an impact, because those also do have a factor in deciding whether you get into a strong college or not.
I think the inverse of that myth would be a lot of students think that if they get one bad grade that they're never going to get into their top college. And for some students, that'll be like, oh, I got a D freshman year. Am I ever going to get into USC? Or some students that'll even be like, oh, I got one B. Am I ever going to get into Harvard? So What would you say to those students?
Yeah, I would say, again, if it's, in a lower grade, for example, 9th or 10th grade, and if you've improved in the subject since, I definitely think there's a shot. But if you maybe have a C in 11th grade calculus, that might be something to reconsider, because a perfect GPA or a really strong GPA doesn't hurt. If you are looking at, I would say, the top 20, 25 colleges, your GPA has to be strong because many of the students will be. But perfect isn't the necessity.
Right. And good grades are especially important, like you said, junior, senior year,
right.
And then also in your subject of interest. So if you had a C in calculus and you're applying to be a math major, definitely that would give admissions officers pause.
Yeah. Right. But if you had a C in calculus in 10th grade and you're trying to be an English major and you had, 5s in AP Lang and an A throughout, your high school career in humanities classes, that's definitely good. Talk to your counselor. They'll be able to tell you a lot.
Myth number 8, true or false, volunteer experience is a must for college applications.
Yeah, this is actually one where our admissions officers didn't have consensus. So some said that this is false, that volunteering is a nice addition to an extracurricular activity list, but it's not required. Students have heavy commitments elsewhere and they're starting companies, doing their own thing, and that are more impressive than volunteering. Admissions officers understand that students only have a certain amount of time to dedicate this outside studying, so they might not have time to volunteer. However, other admissions officers from Ivy League schools as well have said that volunteering is one of the ways that you demonstrate that you care about others. So if you don't have any other activity in your resume that shows that altruistic side, you should definitely try volunteering. But don't do it just for the sake of, doing it for the college applications. If the opportunity presents itself and you genuinely care about the cause that you're supporting and you're helping, you should do it. And obviously, don't ruin your entire schedule and go skip activities that are actually unique and can help you stand out, and go ahead and volunteer. What you should do is see if you have the chance to make a difference in your community, or if you can start an activity that can count as volunteering at the same time, but you can also show your initiative, show that leadership skill. I think that's a good way to combine these things.
Yeah, and I would say admissions officers can tell if you're phoning in any activity, including volunteering. So if you're just doing the bare minimum for NHS or beta, or you're doing an hour a week, they can tell that that's maybe not as impactful for you.
Yeah, that's right. They really can tell, because they've seen so much. So
yeah, they can tell everything. You're not getting anything past them.
Yeah, you shouldn't try to be too clever. They'll know that you haven't spent 52 weeks a year volunteering.
Myth number 9, true or false, demonstrated interest is important.
This is very true, and more every year. I would say not at the top 10 or 15 schools, because everyone wants to get into Harvard, everyone wants to go to Princeton. They don't really want to know that your interest in them is authentic. They just know the reputation they carry. But for schools that are a little different tier, I would say schools like Washington University in St. Louis, or top liberal arts colleges such as Williams, Wellesley, Amherst, or schools like Tufts, Northwestern, they do look at demonstrated interest, and you can do this in a certain way, demonstrate your interest in certain ways. You can sign up for information sessions, attend these information sessions, go on campus tours, whether it's that online or offline, take notes, talk to admissions officers who visit your college or high school, seek them out at campus fairs, keep in touch with them. I would also say that if you have a club that you're particularly interested in, you can contact the leader of that club or someone who does outreach, and talk to them about what that entails. Go sit in on a class if that's applicable. Students or colleges do have days for prospective students where they allow students to visit, stay overnight, attend a class or two. So these are ways that you can demonstrate interest. And I would give one tip, which is that make sure your Common App email address and the email address you use to sign up for these events is consistent, because that's how they'll know that this is the same person. I will also say that a great way to do this is through supplemental essay. You can say, when I attended the information session or when I went on campus tour, I was captivated by XYZ in your college, and they will know that you've done the research. So colleges track demonstrated interest because they are interested in yield. That is how many students they accept eventually decide to attend the school. So they want that number to be high. So if you decide to, show your interest in these XYZ amount of ways, they'll know that you are genuinely interested in their school. And, a little bit, it does count towards your admissions chances.
Those are really good tips. Write that down, students. And from interviewing all the former admissions officers I have, a lot of them have from Ivy level schools have said, even though demonstrated interest isn't technically it's not one of the things that's officially valued, it does for some admissions officers, it can help them decide between two candidates if one candidate has really showed a lot of passion for the school.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, you should definitely be passionate about school. You shouldn't just say, I want to go to Harvard because it's Harvard and I've seen it in every movie. That's not a reason, or, so you should definitely really do that research, go that extra mile, learn about the school, find out if it's a genuine fit for you. Again, like I said, they know everything. They know if you're just in it for the name or if you are actually interested in their college. So do research, demonstrate that interest no matter what school.
Yeah, I go on the company account and I go and I answer people's admissions questions all over the internet, Reddit, TikTok, Facebook, all over the internet. And there was one Reddit thread of someone who was convince me why I should apply to Northwestern, give me reasons I can talk about for school fit. And I was like, oh buddy,
someone else can't answer that for you.
You can't answer that. We can't be giving you reasons you want to apply to a school. If you don't want to apply to a school, admissions officers can sniff that out in a second. Yeah.
When I talk to my students about their school list, it's so obvious in their voice which school genuinely took their interest and which schools they're feeling meh about. And it comes through in your essays too. They can read your tone in your essay, and then they'll know when you've copy pasted from the website or whatever.
For myth number 10, true or false, you have to be well-rounded, meaning that you need to be excelling in every area.
No, so this is very common and it is very much false. This was an old philosophy that was very popular 20 plus years ago. I would say when I was applying to college 10 years ago, I also thought that you have to be well-rounded, but it's not true at all. Colleges want specialists and people who can excel in one or two areas so that they can bring something special to that campus community. Oftentimes colleges have these, quotas where they're we want X amount of neuroscientists or X amount of people who play the violin. And so if you really perfected that skill and if you've shown that you are, able to succeed in that special area, they're likelier to want you because they'll see how you've made an impact in that specific area. So having your activities list kind of grouped by similar activity and having a bunch of activities that kind of follow that theme that we call application persona at InGenius, that's what's important.
Yeah, like you said, this did used to be true. And I think that's kind of where the problem lies. I think a lot of parents and teachers give students this advice because it was true when they were applying to college, even probably when their oldest child, the older siblings were applying to college. So they don't realize that it's just not accurate advice anymore. And I think it even was true when I was applying to colleges, like you said. I can remember when I was in elementary school, I got one of those giant college books. This is pre-internet, I guess. So,
yeah.
It was it had profiles for every school, and I was oh, I want to go to Stanford. And my mom was you can't go to Stanford, you don't play a sport, you're not well-rounded enough. And I was I'm 8. I think I have time to round. But yeah, good news, you don't have to play a sport, kids. not to get into Stanford. Okay, and myth number 11, true or false? Schools use AI to filter out applications, and AI is artificial intelligence, if you don't know.
Right. So I would say this is still false. Human element is very important within the application process, especially at the most selective schools. However, our admissions officers have said that schools use AI for chat functionality or to better serve students before the summer that they enroll. But it seems more prevalent in less selective schools that, a bot is answering your question. Colleges have human admissions officers who are there to really understand the differences in students' activities and understand what makes them special. And, like these essays you're writing, there are talking to humans with feelings and emotions that you are able to evoke when you write your sentences and statements and these, big, bold declarations of who you are, what you want to do. And like humans should be the ones who ultimately decide, what's genuine. And like I said, humans can tell that you might be exaggerating something in your application, but I don't know that robots will be able to tell in the same way. They'll be like 52 weeks, great. Anyway, not to slander robots because maybe they will take over in the future. I will say that regardless of AI or human, there is some initial evaluation of application strength at the top colleges based on the quantitative side of things, SAT, GPA, AP scores, etc. These are things that get you serious consideration. And then, colleges will look at the other things that you're doing as they like seriously consider you. For example, if you are being read at Stanford or Harvard and you have a GPA of 2, like they'll already know that they're not likely to consider you, even though that's sad.
Yeah, robots are really scary. I watched The Terminator a lot growing up, so I do. Yeah. I totally understand your want to not slander them, because I do think we need to watch out just in case they take over. But I do think there are 2 caveats for this myth. So this myth, we actually, it was a comment on one of our TikToks that somebody was asking about. So we went and asked our former admissions officers about this, and they were very clearly no, admissions officers definitely don't use AI. But like you said, they are reading all the applications, but if you do have a 2.0 GPA and they see that immediately, they're not going to be giving your application as thorough of a read and consideration as they would be for a candidate with a 4.0, unfortunately. And that doesn't mean that no one ever gets into Stanford with a 2.0, under extraordinary circumstances, maybe, but definitely probably not. And the second consideration would be, we talked about in our episode with Heather and Mary from it was a recap of the National Association of College Counseling, the conference from 2021. They did say actually that AI in admissions was a big topic last year. So there's definitely a lot of interest for how it might be implemented, but we're not there yet. And admissions officers are really aware of how AI would kind of recreate human biases. So that's definitely something that they are probably hesitant to implement.
Right.
So it is a big conversation.
Right. I feel like often AI wouldn't recognize something that's harmful or hurtful or controversial in the same way that a human might. So
yeah, and they have to. And all whenever someone goes and works in an admissions office, they have to go through bias training so that they can identify their own biases. That's very important. But it's impossible for someone to identify all their biases. So of course, any AI software that a human is creating is going to reflect that human's biases.
That's right. Yeah.
So admissions misinformation is really rampant. As the social media manager, I see truly, like I said, I'm on Reddit, I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And I just see the craziest claims. So how can students evaluate the information that they run into online with regards to admissions? And then how can they find sources that are accurate and that are reliable?
Right. So I would say, do your own research. Don't necessarily turn to forums where other people who are curious about the same things have tried to give answers. I would say the most reliable sources are always the official college websites, people who've worked in admissions offices. So, channels like ours, or, if you know someone who has worked at a college, always ask them. And the information is always changing and updating. So to know the latest, you would have to talk to someone who has worked very recently in an admissions office. And if you can't get a hold of them, you can always talk to us. We are available on our social media. We're available through, the comments on our YouTube channel. So you can always ask us, because we have that team of admissions officers who have, those connections, who have that experience, who can tell you. I would also say that look through current class profiles. You can see the ranges of GPAs and SAT scores that have, the students who have been admitted in the latest class have, and that can really help you get a sense of, if you need a perfect GPA or a perfect SAT score.
I think people are just often hesitant to ask the admissions office directly, or they don't want to bother their school counselor. They're uncomfortable with that, which is understandable. But they instead turn to these crowdsourcing platforms like Reddit, or just people who are farther away from the source itself. But there's really no reason that you shouldn't be asking your counselor, or you shouldn't be asking the admissions office directly, unless it's an aggressively stupid question. Don't email Stanford's admissions office and be like, do I have to know how to read?
Yeah,
that's a dumb example. I
will say, as someone who has answered admissions questions, it helps if your question is a little bit broad and applies to multiple people, rather than giving your entire stats and saying, oh, do I have a chance at Stanford? No, it shouldn't be like that. You should say, oh, does Stanford accept students who have had, slightly lower GPAs or something like that? More general, so it can apply to multiple cases.
Yeah, I'd say a good rule is that the admissions office is always the best resource for school specific questions. If you have a question about whether you need to take your 4th year of Spanish to get into Stanford, or whether it's going to hurt your admissions chances, contact the Stanford admissions office. If you have a question about whether or not you need to take physics senior year to get into a top college, go talk to your college counselor, because they work at your school. They've seen all your classmates' profiles, all the people who've come before you. They're the most familiar with what your school offers, and comparatively how other students at your school are doing or have done, what schools they've gotten into. And yeah, just these adults, they're here to help, they're counselors or they're admissions officers because they like that job. So they do want to help you, as long as you're not annoying.
Last year, I actually emailed your school, USC, about how applications are read at the different colleges within the campus, because I was confused what my students should put as their first choice major versus second choice major, because they were at 2 different schools. And they replied within 24 hours and was extremely helpful and said, if you need anything else, don't hesitate to contact me. So chances are they're really nice, especially if luck is on your side and you catch them on a good day.
And don't be afraid to follow up either. Adults are really busy. We get a lot of emails. So 99% sure, if someone doesn't respond to your email, it's not because they're mad at you, they don't hate you, they didn't think it was a stupid question. They just probably they saw your email, they were going to respond, and then they went to lunch and then they forgot. Their inbox is super full. So if you don't get a response, just send a polite follow-up. Hi, hope you're doing well. I'm sure you're busy with XYZ season. I just wanted to follow up on my email. I was hoping I could receive a response to you. Thank you for your time, etc.
Right.
Well, we always like to end these episodes just asking about additional words of wisdom. You've been on so many episodes, so you've shared a lot of wisdom. But is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything you're really feeling this month, words of wisdom for your students?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think something is a myth and it's ridiculous, it's probably a myth and it's ridiculous. I think don't be hesitant to judge your own sense of, common sense as well. And the internet does have a lot of opinion, but just go to the official sources. One more thing I remembered is that if you go on a campus tour, you can always ask the student who's giving you the tour some questions about the official admissions process, because, they might be less intimidating to you than a real adult, and they are serving as the liaison between the student body and the admissions process, and might often know things about being a student at that college that the admissions office might not even know. So don't forget to utilize your resources that are all around. Anyone is your friend and they're there to help you. That's literally their job.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Poto. I'm sure our listeners appreciate your insight into college admissions myths and misconceptions. For more information, check out our blog linked in the episode description. If you have any questions or would like to request a topic for a future episode, go ahead and give us a follow and send us a message on social media with the hashtag InsideAdmissions. That's all for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time as we continue our journey inside the admissions office.